6 months ago, I was invited by a friend to climb El Cerro Chirripó with her and her family. El Cerro Chirripó is the highest mountain in Costa Rica, with an elevation of 3,820 meters. I had always dreamt of climbing it, and I had no need to think it twice. "Count me in," I told my friend. And 2 days later, I was waking up to begin the biggest challenge of my life. I frequently hiked with my dad on the weekends. Nonetheless, I had never trained for a 40-kilometer hike before, whereas everyone else in my friend's family had. Feelings aside, the hike had begun. The first kilometer was one of the toughest. It was a steep slope uphill and a drastic change in the heart rate. After only a couple of minutes, I was reflecting on how I would tell my friend's parents that I could no longer continue climbing, and that I was going back, either walking or dragged downhill. Suddenly, in the middle of my panting, it all became pretty funny. I realized there was no way I was giving up, and with a quick change of attitude, each step became stronger and one less to reach the top. As soon as I realized, I had already reached the first kilometer sign. I knew worrying about the pain in my knees and the racing of my heart would take me nowhere. And though it was still there, I took every chance I could to observe the beautiful scenery above, below, and besides me. I looked at the view from the cliff. I looked for shapes in the trees and creatures in the rocks, but most importantly, I remained positive. 15 kilometers later, we had reached the shelter. After food and sleep, next morning at 5 a.m., we were ready for the next 10-kilometer hike. The elevation began to trouble our lungs, and the sky was so clouded we couldn't see the peak of the mountain. It was disappointing because it felt like we weren't advancing, and we knew what a clouded sky meant. If it remained like that, we wouldn't be able to see anything once we made it to the peak. I remember praying in my head for the sun to come out. My mother taught me to do so before I lost hope. Finally, the clouds began to disappear, and right in front of us was the last rock wall to the peak. I got so excited, my friend told me I took the lead and climbed those steep rocks like a spider. In a blink of an eye, I was up. There were other people talking, but I heard nothing, only the beating of my heart and the whistle of the wind. I left my crew and hiked to a big rock further to the right. I sat there for what felt like a lifetime. After some time, I realized my eyes were closed. I wasn't looking at the view. I needed no reassuring that I was above it all. I could feel it. For the first time, I was fully living in the moment. Finally, as I opened my eyes, I knew that climbing El Chirripó was not about what you saw when you were up there, but about what you felt. On the way down, my mind was somewhere else. All of a sudden, we were back at the shelter, and soon after I began feeling sick. My skin was burning, my head felt as if exploding, and the nausea wouldn't let me eat. I had a heat stroke. The next morning, it was time to hike the last 15 kilometers down. I felt even worse, but I had no choice, so I filled myself with optimism and began. Not 1 kilometer had passed when my legs started bailing on me. My muscles were burning, my knees shaking, and my feet were probably bleeding. It was no longer a matter of catching your breath. You ultimately depended on the resistance of your muscles. And I still had 14 kilometers more to go. I will not lie, I thought I wasn't gonna make it, but it wasn't just me. There was a whole crew who depended on my tenacity, just as much as I depended on theirs. We were a team, and that thought kept me going. Whenever one felt weak, the others would cheer him up. Finally, when we couldn't have given one more step, we saw the entrance. We were finally there. I threw myself on the dirt. Probably even the mosquitoes and ants could sense my torment, so they left me alone. Shortly, I didn't mind the pain anymore, nor the sickness, nor the panting, nor the heat, nor the blood in my toes, nor the fact that I was probably getting sunburned again. Nothing mattered as much as the satisfaction I felt. I realized that it had been worth it, and that the pains would never compare to the wonders I had seen and felt those days. But they were part of it. I learned that sometimes life will give you troubles, and just like the trail to El Chirripó, it will make you want to turn back and give up. Yet whenever you feel that way, remember that there is something huge waiting for those who persevere. As of today, I am determined to live by that thought and give my best along the way so I can reach the best someday.